I still remember the first time I heard the whispers on the wind, the soft, shivering tales of a man who refused to bow forever. They said he moved like a shadow, invisible in the heat of the Florida sun, carrying secrets that could topple a world built on chains. I never knew his name, but his story lingered like smoke, curling into the corners of empty fields and abandoned cabins. Imagine the thick, humid air of a plantation in the mid-1800s, the sweat of the earth, the stench of horses, and the relentless gaze of those who thought themselves masters of everything. Every footstep on the creaking boards of the big house could spell danger. Every glance over your shoulder, a test of courage. He was a man trapped in chains, yet not broken. And one day, he made a choice that would ripple through the cotton fields and pine forests of Florida. Decision that defied the rules of his world. This is not a story meant to shock with blood. It's a story of planning, cunning, and courage. The story of a slave who dared to reclaim a fragment of freedom in the most impossible of circumstances. Florida in the early 19th century was a land of sweltering heat, tangled forests, and vast plantations that stretched into the horizon. Spanish and American rule had left the state a patchwork of laws, cultures, and communities, but one thing remained the same. Slavery was the engine of wealth. Cotton, sugar, and timber fields demanded endless labor, and the people forced to work them endured grueling days under unforgiving overseers. Plantation life was a daily struggle against both the physical and psychological weight of oppression. Enslaved men and women woke before dawn, their hands raw from tools, their bodies aching from the relentless Florida sun. At night, the air was thick with the smell of cooking fires and the whispers of those plotting small acts of resistance. A loosened wagon wheel, a hidden carving, a story told in code. The masters ruled with an iron fist. Their authority was visible in every aspect of life: the lash, the watchful eyes, the locked cabins, and the invisible barriers of fear. Yet beneath the surface, enslaved people nurtured private worlds of resilience. Songs carried hidden messages. The river became both sanctuary and escape route. Even a simple object, like a chipped cup or a worn cloth, could hold symbolic power, signaling hope, connection, or rebellion. Among these oppressed people, courage was often silent but potent. Survival required cunning as much as strength. Every whispered conversation, every stolen moment in the shade of the cypress trees was an act of defiance. And it was here, in the humid forests and sun-baked fields of Florida, that our story begins. A man whose mind was sharper than any blade, whose will burned brighter than the chains that bound him. His name, whispered only in shadowed corners, was Samuel. A man in his early 30s, with hands scarred from work, yet capable of surprising gentleness. He had been born into slavery on a sprawling plantation in northern Florida, a place where pine needles littered the paths like a soft carpet, yet every corner carried danger. Samuel's master, a man named Jonathan Harwood, was known for cruelty masked behind civility. On paper, he was a landowner, a businessman, a figure respected by neighbors. But to Samuel, he was the embodiment of oppression, his whip a constant threat, his words sharp and cutting. Yet life in the fields was not without moments of resistance. Samuel learned the subtle arts of defiance early, slipping letters to others, teaching secret codes in whispered songs, and moving silently through the night to aid friends in peril. There were tiny victories, a hidden piece of bread, a swapped key, a note tucked beneath the floorboards. These small acts were dangerous, yet they were proof that even in bondage, one could claim agency. One humid evening, Samuel sat beneath the ancient oaks near the river, listening to the distant calls of wild birds. He traced his finger in the dirt, sketching symbols only he could understand. Plans had begun to take shape. Nothing violent at first, just observation, listening, learning routines. watching the flow of people and power through the plantation. He memorized every creaking floorboard in the main house, every hidden path through the surrounding woods, every time the guards changed. He wasn't reckless. Every choice had moral weight. He thought about the consequences, not just for himself, but for the others enslaved on the plantation. If discovered, punishment could ripple across the community. And yet, the injustice he endured demanded action. There were nights he lay awake, imagining confrontation with Harwood. What would it feel like to face a man who considered himself omnipotent? Fear came, as it always did, but so did resolve. Samuel's mind worked like a lockpick, finding vulnerabilities, testing possibilities, imagining every scenario in quiet, meticulous detail. Whispers of the plan grew among trusted allies. A stolen glance here, a brief nod there, carrying messages. Hidden in folded cloth or waterlogged bark. Each signal was a heartbeat in a larger scheme, and each day brought the weight of anticipation. How long before a single misstep could undo everything? As the weeks passed, the tension thickened. Samuel watched from the shadows as Harwood's arrogance created cracks in the facade of authority. The guards, confident in their routine, rarely noticed the silent observer. Every time a door creaked, or a floorboard moaned under a boot, Samuel held his breath. Every unexpected sound, a dog's bark, the whisper of wind through the pines, was a potential alarm. The plan evolved. Samuel acquired tools slowly, hidden in corners no one would think to search. A small hammer, a sharpened piece of metal, even a simple piece of cord, all were pieces of a larger puzzle. He studied the rhythms of the plantation, mealtime, prayers, when the overseers inspected the fields. He traced the layout of Harwood's manor with his mind, memorizing where shadows fell at sundown, where doors clicked softly, and which corridors offered escape. Fear was constant. He remembered nights of whimpering children in nearby cabins, the distant cries that reminded him what was at stake. This wasn't just about freedom for himself. It was about breaking the invisible chains of terror. Each plan weighed on his conscience, each movement a test of patience and courage. Then came the night when everything aligned. A storm brewed over the horizon, the wind shaking the eaves of the plantation, and rain began to pound against the tin roofs. In that darkness, Samuel moved like water silent, patient, deliberate. Every step had purpose. Every breath measured. He paused in the hallway, listening. A guard snored near the staircase, oblivious to the figure passing inches from his face. In his hand, a simple tool glinted dimly, meant for sabotage, not slaughter. Samuel reminded himself, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Waiting for the perfect moment, inside the master's study, Samuel found the symbolic heart of the plan. He paused, recalling the faces of fellow slaves, imagining the future beyond this night. The stakes were immense, yet he felt a surge of clarity. This was not just vengeance, it was reclamation. Every whisper, every coded signal, every act of hidden defiance had led to this precise moment. The confrontation came quietly, almost invisibly. Harwood, confident in his invulnerability, never sensed the careful encroachment of Samuel's strategy. In the dim candlelight, the two faced each other, not in a battle of fists, but in a battle of wits. Samuel moved with precision, using the master's own arrogance against him. A trapdoor, a hidden latch, a momentary distraction. Everything was calculated, every second stretched into eternity. The storm outside rattled windows, masking sounds. Harwood's voice was sharp, but Samuel's resolve was sharper. One final maneuver, and the balance of power shifted. Not through raw violence, but through cunning and knowledge, Samuel asserted. Control in a world designed to deny him any agency. The moment passed with a thunderous silence afterward. Samuel stepped back, letting the weight of what had occurred settle over him. The plantation Harwood's domain was suddenly transformed. In an instant, not by force alone, but by intelligence, courage, and meticulous planning. In the days that followed, the plantation was a tense, uneasy place. Whispers spread like wildfire, uncertainty filling the halls and cabins. Samuel moved cautiously, helping friends navigate the new reality, offering guidance and watching the responses of those in power. Some sought revenge, some fled, some hid, and Samuel observed quietly, knowing that true victory was not just in survival, but in the knowledge that the seeds of courage had been planted. He had altered the dynamics of fear, and for a brief but profound moment, the shackles seemed lighter, the air less heavy. The moral of the story was clear to those who had eyes to see. Oppression could be challenged. Cunning could outmatch cruelty. And courage, even in silence, could rewrite the rules of an unjust world. Samuel's actions became legend, passed in whispers, songs, and coded notes that traveled long after he vanished into the forests and rivers of Florida. History often remembers the powerful, the loud, and the victorious. But sometimes it is the quiet, calculated defiance of the oppressed that leaves the deepest mark. Samuel's story is not just about a single act of rebellion. It is about resilience, ingenuity, and the refusal to accept a life defined by chains. He reminds us that courage is not always a roar. It can be a measured step, a whispered plan, a carefully chosen moment of defiance. In the shadowed corners of history, people like Samuel claim fragments of freedom in ways the world cannot erase. The fields may forget, the masters may vanish, but the courage of those who dared will echo forever. Every whispered tale, every secret act of resistance, every subtle triumph over cruelty, these are the true markers of human ingenuity. And as we walk through the echoes of history, perhaps we carry with us a fragment of that same courage, to resist, to endure, and to rise even when the world insists we remain in shadow.